I'm Jade Wilson, 34, and I thought I knew what betrayal felt like until that Tuesday at Glow Beauty Salon, when the chatty brunette in the chair next to mine started gushing about her amazing boyfriend, James. I felt a chill run through me. Same work schedule, same birthday gift, same weekend business trip. My husband's secrets were being handed to me by his mistress, who had no idea who I was. Before I dive into what happened next, drop a like if you've ever had that gut feeling something wasn't right in your relationship. Growing up in Seattle, I always prided myself on being level-headed and practical. My parents taught me the value of hard work, which led me to pursue my passion for interior design. After graduating with honors, I started my own small business, Wilson Interior Design, specializing in residential spaces. I loved transforming houses into homes that told the unique stories of the people living in them. My career was thriving, and I felt confident in my professional life. 8 years ago, I attended my college roommate's wedding. That's where I met James. He was the best man, and when he stood up to give his speech, I couldn't take my eyes off him. Tall, with warm brown eyes, and a smile that lit up the room, James captivated everyone with his charisma and humor. Later that night, he asked me to dance, and we talked until the venue closed. Our romance felt like something out of a movie: weekend getaways, surprise flowers at my office, and long conversations that lasted until sunrise. James worked as a marketing executive for a prestigious firm. Everyone loved him: my family, my friends, even my tough-to-impress father. He had this way of making people feel special, like they were the only person in the room. I fell hard and fast, believing I'd found my forever person. We married after 18 months of dating in a beautiful ceremony by the coast. We bought a fixer-upper in the suburbs and spent weekends painting walls and arguing over furniture placement. Those were some of my favorite memories, covered in paint, laughing at each other's terrible DIY skills, but creating something that was uniquely ours. For 6 years, our marriage was good. Not perfect, but good. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our favorite restaurants. James would bring me coffee every morning before leaving for work. I'd text him funny things that happened with clients throughout the day. We'd curl up on the couch most evenings talking about our days or watching movies. It felt comfortable, secure, but looking back, I can pinpoint when things started to change about a year before the salon incident. The shifts were subtle at first. James started working later, claiming big projects and important clients needed his attention. His phone became an extension of his hand, and he'd take calls in another room. When I'd ask about his day, his answers became vague, lacking the details he used to share enthusiastically. I noticed little inconsistencies. A dinner with a client that another colleague knew nothing about. A weekend conference that wasn't on the company website. A new expensive watch when we were supposedly saving for a kitchen renovation. But each time my suspicions rose, I pushed them down. I told myself I was being paranoid, that trust was the foundation of marriage, that James wouldn't betray me. As the months passed, James became increasingly distant emotionally. The coffee in the morning stopped. The texts during the day dwindled. When we were together, he was physically present but mentally elsewhere. I'd catch him staring at his phone, smiling at messages that weren't from me. Our 7th anniversary should have been special. I made reservations at the restaurant where we had our first date. I wore the dress he once said was his favorite. I even arranged for his favorite dessert to be served as a surprise. But James seemed preoccupied throughout dinner, checking his watch repeatedly. He barely touched his food and kept glancing at his phone. Before dessert even arrived, he apologized, claiming an emergency at work required his immediate attention. He kissed my cheek and left me sitting alone at our anniversary dinner. I called my sister Amanda that night, tears streaming down my face. "Something's wrong, Mandy. James isn't James anymore." But she dismissed my concerns. "All marriages go through phases, Jade. You're overthinking things. James adores you. Everyone can see that." I tried everything to reconnect with my husband. I planned surprise date nights. I bought new lingerie. I suggested marriage counseling, which he immediately rejected, insisting we were fine. I took up golf, a sport he loved, but I had zero interest in, just to spend time with him. Nothing worked. The gulf between us kept widening. The business trips increased. Chicago, New York, San Francisco. Always for important meetings that couldn't be handled virtually. The late nights became more frequent. The unexplained expenses on our credit card statements more common. Once I found an unfamiliar perfume on his shirt, something floral and expensive. When I mentioned it, he had an explanation ready. My colleague Sarah was upset about her breakup. I gave her a hug to comfort her. I wanted to believe him, so I did. The weekend before the Salon incident, we had what I now recognize as our last normal days together. James was attentive present. We had breakfast at our favorite cafe, walked around the farmer's market, and even made love for the first time in weeks. I remember thinking maybe things were finally improving. I had no idea it was just the calm before the storm that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The Tuesday after that seemingly perfect weekend, I decided to treat myself to a day of pampering. I had landed a big new client, and with James being so distant, I figured I deserved some self-care. Instead of going to my regular salon closer to home, I booked an appointment at Glow Beauty Salon, an upscale place across town that I'd heard rave reviews about but had never visited. Glow was everything my regular salon wasn't. Sleek, modern, with champagne offered to clients and estheticians who looked like they belonged in fashion magazines. The moment I walked in, I felt slightly out of place in my casual jeans and sweater among women in designer outfits. But the receptionist was warm and welcoming, offering me a glass of champagne as I waited. "First time at Glow?" she asked, handing me the intake form. "Yes, I've been meaning to try it for ages," I replied, filling out my information. "You're going to love Marissa. She's amazing with color." 20 minutes later, I was seated in Marissa's chair, discussing what I wanted done. Just some highlights to brighten up my brown hair for spring. As Marissa was mixing my color, another woman was escorted to the chair next to mine. She was striking, tall, slim, with glossy dark hair and impeccable makeup. She exuded confidence as she settled in, immediately engaging her stylist in animated conversation. As the stylist worked the woman beside me, who introduced herself as Allison, turned her attention to me. We exchanged pleasantries about hair treatments and the unusually warm spring weather. She was friendly and articulate, mentioning she worked in pharmaceutical sales. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed her company. About 15 minutes into our hair treatments, Allison's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her entire face lit up with a smile. "Sorry," she said to me, "that's my boyfriend. He always knows exactly when to check in." I made some polite comment about attentive partners being wonderful. I had no idea how quickly the conversation would turn into my worst nightmare. "We've been together for almost a year now," Allison continued unprompted. He's amazing. Successful, thoughtful, sexy as hell." She laughed, a sound full of genuine happiness that made my stomach twist with unexpected jealousy. My own relationship had been lacking that kind of joy for months. "What does he do?" I asked, making conversation. "He's in marketing, executive level at Thompson & Brooks." My heart skipped a beat. That was James's firm. But I reminded myself that Thompson & Brooks was a large company with multiple marketing executives. It had to be a coincidence. "He travels a lot for work," Allison continued. "Chicago, New York. Just got back from San Francisco last week, actually." The same cities? The same timing? My hands began to tremble slightly, but I kept my expression neutral as Marissa applied foils to my hair. "It's hard with him being gone so much," Allison said, scrolling through her phone. "But he makes up for it. Look at what he brought me from San Francisco." She held up her phone, showing a picture of an elegant gold bracelet with a distinctive pendant. I recognized it immediately. I had seen it in a jewelry store window when James and I were celebrating our anniversary in Napa Valley 3 years ago. I had admired it, but we decided it was too expensive. Apparently, it wasn't too expensive for Allison. It's beautiful, I managed to say, my mouth suddenly dry. He has amazing taste, Allison said proudly. For Valentine's Day, he took me to this incredible cabin in the mountains. Total privacy hot tub under the stars, champagne. The works. Valentine's Day, when James told me he had an emergency conference in Denver. When I spent the evening alone watching romantic comedies and falling asleep before he even called to check in. With growing horror, I listened as Allison shared more details. She never showed me a full picture of her boyfriend, just cropped photos. His hand holding hers across a restaurant table, a shot of him from behind, looking out at a beach sunset, his arm around her waist, with their faces out of frame. But I could see his watch in one photo. The vintage Omega I had given James for his 35th birthday. I could recognize the blue shirt he was wearing in another. I had picked it out during our last shopping trip together. My mind was racing, but something in me remained eerily calm. Instead of causing a scene, I decided to gather information. I asked questions feigning interest in her relationship, while my heart shattered into pieces. He sounds wonderful, I said, hoping my voice didn't betray me. Have you met his family? Not yet, Allison replied. That's the only complicated part. He's married. The stylist paused briefly behind me, clearly listening in now. I saw her exchange a look with Allison's stylist in the mirror. But it's not a real marriage anymore, Allison continued, lowering her voice slightly. They've been emotionally done for years. He's planning to ask for a divorce soon. He's just waiting for the right time because she's kind of fragile. Fragile? Is that how James described me? He actually just put a down payment on a condo, Allison confided, leaning closer. Once everything's finalized with the divorce, we'll move in together. I've already started looking at furniture. A condo? My mind flashed to the unexplained withdrawals from our joint savings account that James had vaguely attributed to investment opportunities. How did you two meet? I asked, amazed at how steady my voice remained. At a pharmaceutical conference last spring. I was representing my company, and his firm was handling the marketing. He approached me at the networking mixer. She smiled at the memory. We just clicked immediately, talked until 3 a.m. Last spring. When our marriage still felt solid to me, when I still believed in us. For the next hour, as my hair was colored, rinsed, and styled, I listened to Allison detail her relationship with my husband. Weekend getaways disguised as business trips, expensive dinners at restaurants across town from where we lived. Secret phone calls during his late nights at the office. With each revelation, my shock hardened into something colder, more resolved. The final confirmation came when Allison mentioned the watch again. It was his birthday last month, and I wanted to get him something special. He mentioned always wanting this particular vintage Omega model. I spent weeks tracking one down. My blood turned to ice. James's birthday was 2 months ago. I had given him that exact watch 4 years earlier. He had told me he lost it at the gym last year, had been apologetic and upset about it for days. In reality, he had given it to Allison to pretend it was a new gift from her. As our appointments concluded, Allison checked her makeup in the mirror. I'm meeting him for dinner tonight, she said excitedly. It's our unofficial anniversary, 11 months since our first date. We walked to the reception desk together to pay. It was so nice meeting you, Allison said, handing me her business card. We should get coffee sometime. I don't have many girlfriends in this city who aren't connected to work. I took her card, smiled, and agreed that coffee would be lovely, all while knowing that our next meeting would be nothing like what she imagined. The drive home from the salon remains a blur in my memory. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I remember having to pull over once because tears blurred my vision too much to drive safely. I remember screaming in my car, hitting the dashboard until my palms stung. Then sitting in perfect stillness, something cold and determined settling in my chest. When I finally arrived home, the house felt different, contaminated by the knowledge I now possessed. Our wedding photos on the wall, once treasured, now seemed like mockeries. The couch, where we'd cuddled through countless movies, was just furniture. The bed we shared was no longer a sanctuary, but a monument to lies. I knew James wouldn't be home for hours. His text earlier said he had a late meeting, which I now understood likely meant dinner with Allison. This gave me time to search for evidence. I started in his home office, a space I had always respected as his. I opened drawers I had never looked through before, examined files I had never questioned. In the back of his desk drawer, behind folders of mundane paperwork, I found a small box. Inside was a prepaid phone. Basic, nothing fancy. The kind you buy when you don't want calls tracked on your regular bill. My hands trembling, I turned it on. No password protection. James had grown careless in his deception. The message history confirmed everything. Texts to and from A. Sweet nothings, explicit photos, logistics of meetups, plans for their future together. Complaints about me, his emotionally needy wife, who wouldn't understand his need for space. The dozens of lies he'd told me repurposed into dozens of lies he told her. In his closet behind his winter boots, I found a small travel bag containing hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and tickets to shows I never knew he attended. One receipt was for a jewelry store downtown, the bracelet Allison had shown me. But the most damning evidence came from our bank statements. James had always handled our finances, claiming his background in business made him better suited for it. I had trusted him completely. Now I combed through 6 months of statements, finding multiple withdrawals to an account I didn't recognize. A quick online search revealed it was for a mortgage lender. The condo Allison had mentioned wasn't just talk. James had actually put a 20% down payment on a luxury property across town. I photographed everything, made copies, and secured the evidence in a cloud account only I could access. Then I called the one person I knew would help without judgment. "Amanda, I need you to come over. Now. And don't tell anyone." My sister arrived 30 minutes later, concern etched on her face. "Jade, what's going on?" "You sounded terrible on the phone." I wordlessly handed her the prepaid phone and watched as she scrolled through the messages, her expression morphing from confusion to shock to fury. "That lying, cheating bastard," she whispered, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "Jade, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you when you said something was wrong." For hours, Amanda helped me trace more evidence. She found credit card statements showing dinners for two at romantic restaurants on nights James claimed to be working late. She discovered hotel charges in our own city. He hadn't even bothered to go out of town to cheat sometimes. And she found emails between James and his friend Mike discussing the affair, with Mike offering his cabin for their rendezvous. Mike knew, I said, the betrayal compounding. Mike and his wife Lisa had been our friends for years. We'd vacationed together, celebrated holidays together. "Does Lisa know too?" "I don't know," Amanda admitted. "But we'll find out." The next day, while James was at work, I followed him during his lunch break. Sure enough, he met Allison at a small French bistro downtown. I parked across the street and used my camera's zoom lens to capture photos of them together, holding hands across the table, sharing a kiss when they thought no one was looking. Each click of the shutter felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. That evening, I contacted a divorce attorney recommended by a client, someone discreet and aggressive. When I showed her the evidence I'd gathered, she nodded approvingly. "This is good, Mrs. Wilson. Very good. And it's fortunate you came to me now. See this?" She pointed to documentation of recent business transactions I'd found. "He's trying to transfer company shares to a separate entity before filing for divorce. It's a common tactic to hide assets." "Can he do that?" I asked. "Not legally, and not now that we know about it." We'll file an emergency motion to freeze assets. I left her office with a plan and a strange sense of calm. The more I learned about James's betrayal, the more my heartbreak transformed into determination. Over the next few days, I discovered through careful conversations that several of our mutual friends had suspected or known about the affair. No one had told me. We weren't sure, one friend admitted when confronted. And James said your marriage was basically over anyway, that you were staying together for appearances. The double betrayal, from both my husband and my social circle, should have destroyed me. Instead, it crystallized my resolve. I would not be the victim in James's narrative. I would not be the fragile wife he had described to his mistress. I would take control of the story, and I would make sure everyone knew the truth. Through it all, I maintained a perfect facade with James. I greeted him with the same kiss on the cheek when he came home. I asked about his day with the same polite interest. I pretended not to notice when he slipped away to text Allison. I was gathering my strength for what would come next. After a week of investigation and preparation, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. A private confrontation would allow James to control the narrative, to spin lies, to manipulate emotions, to potentially turn our social circle against me with his charm and persuasive skills. A public revelation would strip him of that power. The opportunity presented itself when James mentioned an important client dinner his firm was hosting at Carmine's, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. "The Sullivan account," he explained over breakfast. "If we land this client, it could mean a huge promotion for me." "That's wonderful," I replied, maintaining my supportive wife facade. "When is it?" "Next Friday, black tie. The whole executive team will be there with their spouses." I took a casual sip of coffee. "Would you like me to come? I know these events are better with partners present." James looked surprised, but pleased. "Actually, that would be great. The Sullivans are big on family values. Having my beautiful, successful wife there would definitely help make a good impression." "I'd be happy to support you," I said, already planning my next move. Later that day, I reached out to Allison on social media, sending a friend request with a message. "It was so nice meeting you at Glow. Would love to grab that coffee sometime soon." She accepted immediately, seeming genuinely happy to hear from her new friend. We messaged back and forth casually for a few days. I learned more about her. She was 32, originally from Chicago, ambitious in her career, and completely in love with her boyfriend, who she believed was trapped in a loveless marriage. After establishing rapport, I suggested meeting for drinks the following Friday. "There's a great bar at Carmine's that I've been wanting to try," I wrote. "Around 8? "That sounds perfect," Allison replied. "I've heard their cocktails are amazing." What she didn't know was that 8 o'clock was exactly when the Sullivan dinner would be in full swing in Carmine's private dining room. James had no idea his carefully separated worlds were about to collide. With the trap set, I focused on preparation. I consulted with my attorney again, ensuring all legal protections were in place. I had already secured copies of our financial records and moved half of our joint savings to an account in my name only. Not enough to be considered hiding assets, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be financially vulnerable in the aftermath. I reached out to several of James's colleagues who would be at the dinner ostensibly to ask about dress code details. In reality, I was establishing connections independent of James, people who might remember me favorably when the truth came out. The day of the dinner, I prepared myself meticulously. I chose a black dress that was elegant but not flashy, something that conveyed dignity and confidence. I had my hair and makeup done professionally, projecting an image of a woman in control. Most importantly, I rehearsed what I would say, planning for various scenarios that might unfold. As I got ready, James seemed unusually attentive, helping zip my dress and commenting on how beautiful I looked. "The Sullivans are going to love you," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "Just be your charming self." If only he knew what my charming self had planned for the evening. On the drive to Carmine's, James briefed me about the clients, their business, their interests, their family. I listened attentively, nodding at appropriate moments while my mind rehearsed the confrontation to come. My purse contained printouts of key evidence, insurance against any attempt by James to deny the truth. As we entered the restaurant, James's hand on the small of my back, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The hurt and confusion that had plagued me for weeks had transformed into a cold, focused purpose. Tonight, the truth would come out, and I would no longer be the only one bearing the weight of his deception. Carmine's exuded old-world elegance. Dark wood paneling, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and servers in formal attire. The maitre d' recognized James, immediately greeting him by name and escorting us to the private dining room where the Sullivan party was gathering. "James, right on time," called Richard Thompson, James's boss and the founder of the firm. A tall man with silver hair and an imposing presence, he shook James's hand warmly before turning to me. "And this must be the lovely Jade. James talks about you constantly," he said, taking my hand. I wondered briefly what exactly James had said about me to his boss while he was planning a new life with Allison. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Thompson," I replied with a genuine smile. After all, Richard wasn't the one who had betrayed me. "Please call me Richard. We're practically family here at Thompson & Brooks." James beamed at this warm reception, clearly relieved that I was making a good impression. He guided me through introductions to the other executives and their spouses, then to the clients. Harold Sullivan, a distinguished man in his 60s, his son Michael, who would be taking over the family business, and their respective wives. "James tells us you're quite the interior designer," Harold Sullivan remarked as we settled at the large round table. "My wife has been talking about redoing our vacation home in Aspen. Perhaps we should exchange cards." "I'd be honored," I replied, engaging Mrs. Sullivan in a conversation about mountain aesthetic while monitoring the entrance to the dining room from the corner of my eye. James was in his element, confidently discussing marketing strategies and dropping just enough personal anecdotes to seem relatable rather than purely business-focused. Everyone at the table appeared charmed by him, exactly as I had been 8 years ago. As appetizers were served, I excused myself to use the restroom. Instead of turning left toward the ladies' room, I went right toward the main bar area. And there she was, Allison, looking stunning in a red dress, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo. She was checking her phone, presumably waiting for me to arrive. She spotted me before I reached her, her face lighting up with recognition. "Jade, so nice to see you again." She stood to greet me with a hug like we were old friends. "Allison, you look beautiful," I said, meaning it. Up close, I could see why James had been attracted to her. Beyond her obvious physical beauty, she radiated warmth and intelligence. "Thanks. I'm actually meeting my boyfriend after this," she confided, smoothing her dress. "It's why I went a little extra with the outfit." "Lucky man," I replied, my heart pounding. "Listen, before we order drinks, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." Allison's smile faltered slightly. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said quietly. "It's not. The man you've been dating, James Wilson from Thompson & Brooks. He's my husband." The color drained from her face. "What? No, that's not. You can't be—" Her eyes searched mine for any sign I was joking. Finding none, she sank back onto her bar stool. "Oh my God. We've been married for 7 years. I continued, maintaining my composure. "He's been lying to both of us." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "He told me his wife knew they were separating, that it was just a matter of paperwork, that you had an understanding." "There was no understanding," I said firmly. "Until I sat next to you at the salon last week, I had no idea he was cheating." "The salon—" Confusion flashed across her face, quickly replaced by horror as realization dawned. "That was you! You knew this whole time, this whole week!" Before I could answer, movement caught my eye. James had emerged from the private dining room, probably looking for me. He scanned the restaurant, his eyes landing first on me at the bar, then shifting to Allison beside me. Even from a distance, I could see the blood drain from his face. "He's here," I said to Allison. "Right now, with clients." James was frozen in place, panic evident in his posture. I gave him a small wave, then turned back to Allison. "You have a choice. You can leave now, or you can come with me and hear the whole truth. Either way, I'm going back in there to expose who he really is." Allison stared at James across the restaurant, her shock giving way to anger. "I want to hear everything," she said, finally standing up. "And I want him to know I know." Together, we walked toward James, who had finally unfrozen enough to intercept us before we reached the private dining room. "Jade," he hissed, his face pale. "What are you doing? Who is this?" He was actually pretending not to know Allison, a final desperate attempt to maintain his lies. "James," I said calmly, loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "This is Allison, but you already know that, don't you? You've been sleeping with her for nearly a year." "Lower your voice," he demanded, glancing nervously toward the dining room. "This isn't the place." "Actually, this is exactly the place," I replied. "Allison, would you like to join us for dinner? I think the Sullivans would be very interested to meet you." "Jade, please," James begged, his confident facade crumbling completely. "Think about what you're doing." "I have thought about it. For a week I've thought about nothing else." I turned to Allison. "Did you know he used our joint savings to put a down payment on your love nest, 20% down on a $500,000 condo? That's $100,000 of our money." Allison's eyes widened. "He told me it was his investment account," she said, her voice breaking. "He said it was money he'd saved before he even met you." "There's a lot he told both of us that wasn't true," I said, taking her arm gently. "Come on, let's get the full story out in the open." James moved to block our path. "Jade, I'm begging you. We can talk about this at home. I'll explain everything." "Like you explained where my anniversary gift to you went, the vintage Omega watch you told me you lost at the gym, then gave to Allison to pretend it was from her." I stepped around him, Allison still by my side. We walked into the private dining room together, all conversation ceasing as heads turned toward us. Richard Thompson stood first, confusion evident on his face. "Jade, is everything all right?" he asked, glancing between me, Allison, and James, who had followed us, in his face ashen. "No, Richard, everything is not all right," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I apologize for interrupting your dinner, but I believe in transparency, and I think everyone here should know exactly who they're doing business with." The room was utterly silent now. The Sullivans, the executives, their spouses, all staring at the drama unfolding before them. "This is Allison," I continued, gesturing to the woman beside me who stood tall despite her obvious distress. "For the past year, my husband James has been having an affair with her. He's been using company events as cover for their meetings, claiming business trips when he was actually taking vacations with her, and recently used our joint savings to purchase a condo where they plan to live after our divorce. A divorce I wasn't aware was being planned." Harold Sullivan's expression darkened. James took a step forward, desperation in his eyes. "Mr. Sullivan, I can explain. This is a private matter that has no bearing on our business relationship." "I disagree," I said calmly, opening my purse and removing several printouts. "When a man will systematically lie to his wife of 7 years, create elaborate deceptions and misappropriate joint funds, it speaks to his character. And character is fundamental to any business relationship." I placed the papers on the table. Bank statements showing the condo down payment, hotel receipts from supposed business trips, screenshots of text messages between James and Allison discussing their future plans. James told Allison I was emotionally fragile and that we had an understanding our marriage was over. I continued. "He told me he was working late while he was with her. He told both of us exactly what we wanted to hear while building a life neither of us knew about. Michael Sullivan picked up one of the bank statements, examining it with a frown. "This is dated 3 days after our first meeting," he noted, "when you assured us your firm maintained the highest ethical standards." James was visibly sweating now, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "This is being taken out of context," he attempted, but his voice lacked conviction. Allison stepped forward. "I had no idea he was lying to his wife," she said, addressing the table. "He told me they were separated in all but legal paperwork. He said she knew about me, but they were keeping up appearances for family reasons." She turned to me, genuine remorse in her eyes. "I would never have been part of this if I'd known the truth." Richard Thompson's face had turned to stone. "James, is this true?" James looked around the table desperately, finding no sympathy in any face. "Richard, please. This is a personal matter." "Not anymore," Richard replied coldly. "Not when you've potentially compromised our firm's reputation and definitely violated our code of ethics." He turned to the Sullivans. "I apologize profusely for this situation. I assure you it does not reflect the values of Thompson and Brooks." Harold Sullivan nodded solemnly. "We all make mistakes in our personal lives, Richard, but deception of this magnitude suggests a pattern of behavior that gives me serious concerns." He glanced at me with something like respect. "Thank you for your honesty, Mrs. Wilson. I'm sorry it had to come at such personal cost." I felt a strange sense of vindication washing over me. "The cost was already paid," I said quietly. "All I'm doing is making sure everyone knows exactly what they purchased with it." Richard asked one of the other executives to escort James out of the restaurant. As James passed me, he whispered, "This isn't over, Jade." "You're right," I replied loud enough for everyone to hear. "The divorce proceedings start tomorrow." I turned to Allison, who looked shell-shocked but resolute. "Would you like me to call you a cab?" She shook her head. "No, actually, if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk. Somewhere private. I think we both deserve the full truth." As we prepared to leave, Richard Thompson approached me. "Jade, I want you to know that James's position at the firm will be under serious review after tonight. What he did was unacceptable on every level." "Thank you, Richard," I said sincerely. Then turning to the Sullivans, I added, "I apologize for disrupting your dinner. That wasn't my intention." Harold Sullivan smiled sadly. "Sometimes disruption is necessary for the truth to come out." He handed me his business card. "My wife was serious about that vacation home renovation. Call my office next week." As Allison and I walked out of Carmine's together, my phone began buzzing incessantly. Messages from people who had witnessed the confrontation spreading the news like wildfire through our social circle. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back in the box. James's carefully constructed double life had finally collapsed, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The days following the confrontation at Carmine's were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. My phone didn't stop buzzing that night or the next day. Messages from dinner attendees, from mutual friends who had heard what happened, from colleagues of James expressing their shock and support. James tried desperately to contact me, calling repeatedly until I blocked his number, then showing up at our house at midnight, pounding on the door, and begging to be let in. I stayed at Amanda's that night, finally allowing myself to break down in the safety of my sister's guest room. "It's okay to cry," Amanda said, holding me as sobs racked my body. "You've been so strong. But you don't have to be strong all the time." For hours I alternated between crying and periods of numb silence. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation had worn off, leaving raw pain in its wake. Not just pain from the betrayal, but from the realization that 7 years of my life had been built partly on lies. How long had James been capable of this level of deception? Had there been others before Allison? Had any part of our marriage been real? By morning, my grief had hardened into resolve. I contacted my attorney first thing, informing her it was time to file the divorce papers we had prepared. With the evidence I had gathered and the public nature of the confrontation, she assured me the process would likely go in my favor, especially regarding the financial settlement. What I hadn't expected was how quickly the news would spread, or how dramatically social alliances would shift. People I thought were firmly in James's corner reached out to express their support for me. Several of his colleagues from Thompson & Brooks called to say they had suspected something wasn't right, but hadn't known the extent of his deception. Most surprisingly, Allison contacted me the day after the confrontation, asking to meet for coffee. We sat at a quiet corner table in a cafe far from our usual haunts, two women united by the same betrayal. "I want you to know I really didn't know he was lying to you," she said, her eyes red from crying. "I feel so stupid now looking back at all the signs I missed." "I lived with him and missed those signs for months," I replied. "He was very good at what he did." Allison nodded, twisting her napkin nervously. I think I wasn't the first. There was a message on his other phone from someone named Carly. It seemed like they had history. Another woman, another set of lies. Somehow this revelation didn't surprise me as much as it should have. Once the foundation of trust was shattered, it was easy to believe James capable of any deception. "There's something else you should know," Allison continued. "The condo. He told me his parents helped with the down payment. I had no idea he took it from your joint savings." We talked for hours, filling in the gaps in each other's understanding of James's double life. In an unexpected twist, I found myself not hating Allison, but seeing her as another victim of James's manipulation. By the time we parted, we had formed a strange alliance born from shared hurt and mutual respect for how each of us had handled the fallout. 3 days after the confrontation, James was placed on administrative leave from Thompson & Brooks. Richard Thompson called to inform me personally. "The board is reviewing his position," he explained. "But between us, Jade, his future with the firm, doesn't look promising. The Sullivans have decided to take their business elsewhere, and 2 other clients have expressed concerns about working with him." James's professional reputation was crumbling alongside his personal one. His carefully cultivated image as the charming, trustworthy marketing executive couldn't withstand the reality of his actions. The man who had always cared so deeply about what others thought of him was now the subject of office gossip and client concerns. As word spread through our social circle, I discovered who my true friends were. Some people distanced themselves uncomfortable with the public nature of the scandal. Others rallied around me with unexpected loyalty. My friend Tara, who I had always thought was closer to James, showed up at Amanda's door with takeout and wine. "I always thought he was too perfect," she admitted. "No one is that charming without hiding something." James's attempts to salvage his image grew increasingly desperate. He sent emails to mutual friends with his version of events, claiming I had been emotionally distant, that we had grown apart naturally, that his relationship with Allison only began after our marriage was effectively over. Few people believed him. The evidence I had gathered told a different story, and the calculated nature of his deception spoke volumes about his character. A week after filing for divorce, I returned to our home while James was staying at a hotel. With Amanda's help, I packed my essential belongings and some sentimental items that were indisputably mine. The house that had once been our shared dream now felt tainted, filled with memories I could no longer trust. As I was leaving, James arrived unexpectedly. He looked terrible. Unshaven eyes, bloodshot clothes wrinkled. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the love I had once felt for him, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of his betrayal. "Jade, please," he said, his voice breaking. "We can fix this. I'll do anything. Therapy, complete transparency, whatever you need. What we had was real." "Was it?" I asked quietly. "Or was it just another performance?" Because I don't know anymore, James. I don't know which parts were genuine and which parts were lies. I do love you, he insisted. Allison was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake. A year-long mistake, a down payment on a condo mistake, a plan our future together mistake. I shook my head. Those aren't mistakes, James. Those are choices. Deliberate choices you made every day for a year. He had no answer for that. As Amanda and I drove away with my belongings, I watched him in the rearview mirror, standing alone in the driveway of the home we had built together. I felt many things in that moment. Sadness, anger, loss, but not regret. The truth had set me free, even if freedom came with its own kind of pain. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising efficiency. James, perhaps realizing the extensive evidence against him and the damage already done to his reputation, didn't contest the major points. My attorney successfully argued that the down payment on the condo should be returned to me in full, along with half of our marital assets and a portion of James's retirement account. 3 months after the confrontation at Carmine's, I received news that James had been formally let go from Thompson & Brooks. By then, he had lost not just his job, but most of his professional network. The charming facade had cracked, revealing the deception beneath, and in a business built on trust and relationships, that was a fatal blow. As for me, I found my interior design business actually improving in the aftermath of the scandal. Perhaps it was sympathy, or perhaps it was the connections I had made independently of James, but new clients appeared, including Mrs. Sullivan, who made good on her husband's promise about the Aspen vacation home. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that fateful day at the Salon. James made one last attempt at reconciliation, showing up at my new apartment with flowers and promises of change. It's too late, I told him simply. I don't hate you anymore, James, but I don't trust you, and I never will again. As he left, I felt not triumph or vindication, but a quiet certainty that I had made the right choice. The woman who had sat frozen in shock at the salon, listening to her husband's mistress unwittingly reveal his betrayal, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and unwilling to settle for anything less than complete honesty. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I stood in the middle of my new apartment, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked, and felt a strange sense of peace. The place was smaller than the house I had shared with James, but it was mine alone, a blank canvas for this new chapter of my life. The journey to this point hadn't been easy. There were days when grief ambushed me unexpectedly. Driving past our favorite restaurant, finding an old anniversary card, hearing our song on the radio. Moments when the weight of 7 years thrown away felt crushing. But those moments became less frequent, less intense as time passed. Therapy had been a lifeline. My therapist, Dr. Larson, helped me understand that James's betrayal wasn't my fault. Affairs are about the choices the unfaithful partner makes, she explained during one session. Not about the person being cheated on. It took months to fully internalize this truth, to stop questioning what I could have done differently or how I had failed as a wife. The systematic nature of James's deception, revealed through my investigation and Allison's additional insights, eventually convinced me that his choices reflected his character flaws, not mine. My relationships with friends and family deepened through this ordeal. Amanda remained my rock, hosting me during those first turbulent weeks and checking in daily even after I found my own place. My parents, initially shocked by the public nature of the confrontation, ultimately supported my decision. "You always were one to face things head-on," my father said, pride evident in his voice. Some friendships didn't survive the divorce. Couples who had been our friends rather than mine felt forced to choose sides. Others were uncomfortable with the messiness of it all, preferring to distance themselves from the drama. But to my surprise, new connections emerged. Women who had experienced similar betrayals, reached out, forming an informal support network. And Allison remarkably became something like a friend. Our unusual bond confused people, but it made perfect sense to us. We had both been deceived by the same man, both had our trust violated, both had to rebuild our understanding of reality. We met occasionally for coffee, comparing notes on our healing journeys and our new James-free lives. Professionally, my interior design business thrived in unexpected ways. The Sullivan Aspen project led to other high-profile clients. My work was featured in a regional design magazine. I hired an assistant to help manage the growing workload. Focusing on my career provided not just financial independence, but a sense of accomplishment and purpose when other aspects of my life felt uncertain. 4 months after the divorce, I learned through the grapevine that James had been let go from his new position at a smaller marketing firm when they discovered the circumstances of his departure from Thompson & Brooks. According to mutual acquaintances, he was struggling to rebuild his professional reputation in our relatively close-knit business community. The news brought me no joy, just a sobering recognition of how thoroughly actions can shape consequences. Healing wasn't linear. Some days felt like major steps backward. Like when I discovered James had started dating someone new just 2 months after our divorce was finalized. I spent that evening crying on Amanda's couch, questioning everything again. "It's not about you," she reminded me, echoing my therapist. "It's about him trying to fill the emptiness without doing the work to change." Other days brought unexpected progress, like the morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about James at all the day before. Or the afternoon I found myself genuinely laughing with friends without the shadow of betrayal darkening the moment. Small victories that accumulated gradually into something like peace. As spring arrived, bringing with it the 1-year anniversary of the Salon encounter, I decided to reclaim a dream James and I had shared, but never fulfilled: a trip to Paris. I booked the ticket on a whim using some of my divorce settlement. "This is a power move," my therapist approved, "taking back your dreams for yourself." The week in Paris became a personal renaissance. I wandered the streets alone, sketching architectural details that inspired me, enjoying long dinners without checking my phone or worrying about someone else's schedule. I rediscovered parts of myself that had been submerged in the partnership of marriage: my love of early mornings, my preference for spontaneous exploration over rigid itineraries, my enjoyment of contemporary art that James had always dismissed. Upon returning home, I channeled this renewed energy into both my business and my personal growth. I joined a weekly painting class, something I'd wanted to do for years. I reconnected with college friends who had drifted away during my marriage. I redecorated my apartment to reflect my aesthetic preferences alone. Bolder colors, more eclectic furnishings, less concern for resale value or another person's comfort. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly at a restaurant opening I attended for a client who had become a friend. I was discussing design options for her office when I spotted James across the room with a woman I didn't recognize. Our eyes met briefly, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no lingering attachment. Just acknowledgement of a person who had once been central to my life and now was merely peripheral. Later that evening, he approached me while I was alone at the bar waiting for a drink. "You look well," he said, awkwardly formal. "Thank you," I replied. "I am well." "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he continued. About what happened. I know it's too late, but I am sorry, Jade. Truly sorry." A year earlier, I would have craved this apology, dissected its sincerity, sought validation in his regret. Now I simply nodded. "I hope you've learned from it, for her sake." I glanced toward his date across the room. "I have," he said quietly. "More than you know." We exchanged a few more pleasantries before I excused myself to rejoin my friends. Walking away, I realized that the woman who had sat in that salon chair a year ago hearing her husband's secrets from a stranger was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more attuned to her own worth. The experience had taught me to trust my instincts, to recognize red flags rather than rationalize them away, to value transparency above comfort. It showed me the strength that lies dormant until circumstances demand its emergence. Most importantly, it revealed that healing, while never perfect or complete, is always possible. As I settle into my new life, my thriving business, my authentic friendships, my rediscovered sense of self, I no longer define my story by the betrayal I experienced. That Tuesday at Glow Beauty Salon will always be a turning point, but it's not the whole narrative. It's simply the moment I stopped accepting less than I deserved and started building the life I truly wanted. One based on truth, self-respect, and the courage to face reality, however painful it might be. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal? Share your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult moments. And remember, sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most necessary transformations. Thank you for listening, and until next time, trust your instincts. They're usually trying to tell you something important.